you're showing us something happened, but like you're telling us literally nothing. Hey y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, I'm going to be doing a Read My Shelves in which I revisit a prior book haul. Alright, so before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments, what is the last book that you read off of your own TBR? So a few months ago, more than a few months ago at this point, I filmed a book haul revisited, where I watched 2 book hauls from about 2 years prior and reacted, counted up the number of books that I had actually read, unhauled, and which ones I still had unread. Well, my patrons actually voted on this video for me to read the books from that revisited book haul. Starting at the top is one that I don't know why, but for some reason in this moment I cannot find it, is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Oseman. So this one is a cozy mystery series where we're following a group of retirees in Britain and basically spend every Thursday trying to solve cold cases. But of course, a crime ends up happening a little bit closer to home, and the 4 of them are determined to try and figure out what is going on. This was really popular for quite some time, which is kind of how I got intrigued to try it. And then whenever the movie came out, it felt like there was a resurgence of popularity for the series. So I actually kind of read it at the perfect time. Honestly, when I purchased that one, I still hadn't really read many cozy mysteries, meaning I still had hope for them at that time. However, since then, I've come to the realization that that sort of subgenre isn't really to my taste, which was doubly unfortunate because I had another cozy-ish mystery on this list, The Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. Now, this series I was very interested in because it has a book within a book setup, and I tend to really enjoy those sorts of stories, like Home Before Dark, The Nothing Man. There's definitely others, but those are the only 2 currently hitting my brain right now. Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. That one just recently had that element as well. So in this, we start out following a woman who is an editor for this mystery series, and it's very a la Hercule Poirot from Agatha Christie. And then she ends up learning that the author of this series has just recently passed in a very suspicious way. And so this editor takes it upon herself to try and, put everything together. And like I said, a book within a book scenario, right up my alley. But it's also cozy. Not really my taste. And it's also a little bit on the chunkier side, especially for a mystery. I feel like a mystery pushing 500 pages is just a little unnecessary usually. And it's ironic I say that because this next one is also on the chunkier side, and that is definitely a big reason why I've yet to get to this book. That one is The Lightning Struck Heart by TJ Klune. Only 430 pages. It's not too long, but it's an independent published book, and the font is super tiny. This one is supposed to be kind of a parody of a fantasy series where we are following Sam of Wilds, and he is basically like the chosen one wizard, and he is supposed to one day become the wizard to the king, but for right now it's just Prince Justin, who's sort of the worst. And unfortunately, Sam returns from an adventure to find out that Prince Justin is planning to marry the sexy knight Sir Ryan Foxheart, who Sam has had a crush on for forever. But before that marriage can officially happen, the poor prince gets kidnapped by a dragon. So our boy Sam, along with his best friend Gary, the hornless unicorn, and Tiggy, a half giant, along with Sir Ryan Foxheart, go on this adventure to try and bring the prince back. And of course, things get a little bit more complicated. It's TJ Klune. I know there's going to be great found family vibes. I'm definitely prepared to cry, I won't lie. I'm also a little nervous to dive into the series where, like I said, the books are not particularly short. And I think there's like 6 or 7 books in this universe now. It's a little bit of an undertaking, but I am really excited to officially start into it. Also really excited to officially start into Sign Here by Claudia Lux, one that I got from Book of the Month in 2022. So I guess it was more like 3 years ago on those book haul videos, whatever. This one is sort of a like fantastical horror story, I hear, where we are following a demon. It's a funny name. What is it? Peyote Trip. That's right. So peyote works in hell, and it's a very business corporate setup. And there's a process where if you manage to get 5 people under the same family, you get promoted or you get some sort of special request or something like that. And he is so close to doing it. He's so determined. But on the opposite side, we also follow this family. I assume we're seeing like either their descent into making a deal with a demon or like teasing at who is it going to be that makes the final deal. I'm not 100% sure. I've heard mixed things about this, but I've heard it's funny. So I still want to get to it. And then also just like the kind of setup that's reminiscent of The Good Place has kept my attention for a very long time now. I want to finally get it read. Here's hoping I finally will. And last but definitely not least is one that's a little different in comparison to the rest of the books for the series, but that's The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. And we're following a woman who I believe her father is involved in the creation of the first English dictionary, and she starts collecting words that are rejected, and I believe a majority of them have to do with either like women or the working class or people of color, and so she utilizes these words to form her own dictionary. I've heard a lot of positive things about this one, but also this author across the board. It sounds interesting, historical fiction with some very strong feminism vibes in it, so I'm really hoping I will enjoy this one. Like I said, it's a little different in comparison to what I've been reading lately. So on that note, let's officially dive into the books. Hey y'all, so I have hit the halfway point into the Thursday Murder Club now. I will say I am enjoying this, but it also very much feels like a cozy mystery, and as we know, cozies just aren't really my thing. I will say I like the adorable old people. I mean, Joyce and Elizabeth are so fun. Ron seems to have lived a very interesting life, and then Abraham, I appreciate a nerdy old man, so I really enjoy him as well. This is hyping me up for the movie. Like in my head, I am picturing all of the actors that play these characters. I think what I'm coming to realize is I would probably appreciate the story more in a movie format, because the way we alternate perspectives around some of these characters, it's making it hard to follow at times because there's such a wide variety of perspectives. I mean, we have the main four, and then we have the police, perpetrator of the crime at one point, we have the victims of the crimes. It's just kind of starting to be a lot. And then we also have the occasional side character like Elizabeth's husband or the man that Joyce is seeing, but there's not always enough in their perspectives to like well establish the characters. So I'll have to really think about who this person is in the scheme of the story, and I think that would just translate better in a movie medium. I will say though, when we see the crime play out, I thought it was done in a way where I was supposed to assume this one person was the perpetrator, and so I was a little worried that was going to be kind of boring, because I don't usually like mystery stories where we already know what happened but we have to watch the characters put everything together. However, was pleasantly surprised to find that was not the case. In fact, there was like a really nice twist with that past the part 2 now, and it almost seems like the mystery is really expanding. There's like multiple different layers at this point that are making me really curious as to what's going on. I am pretty intrigued, but I have found myself a time or two kind of zoning out on the story, and I think it's because at times it seems like there's a lot of detail being given, and the way dialogue is handled is very, this person said this, this person said that, this person said this person said that. It's just a little monotonous at times. There is some comedic stuff in it. It's British, so it's pretty dry, and I do like that. When it comes to the fact that all of these characters are obviously on the older side, there are some funny moments here or there where they utilize their age and the way people perceive them to their own benefit, or how they perceive the world now because of their age. There's been some funny interactions with that too. I do like the cop characters, Chris and Donna, as well, and I'm not quite sure if we're supposed to see a romance developing there. I'm not really feeling it, but like it kind of seems like that might be the direction this is going. I hope not. I hope it's just they're becoming friends. But so far, I am enjoying this in comparison to some other cozy mysteries I've read where I felt like I was just too bored. Again, I think this is a story where when I watch the movie, I'm gonna enjoy it more than I did reading the book, but I'm liking it enough to keep reading. That's something at the very least. At this point, I don't really know if I would continue on with the series yet. I like the characters, but I don't feel so attached to them that I have to get more of them. But I'm also only halfway through. Maybe by the time I finish this, I might have changed my mind there. I don't know. We'll see. Hello, my loves. So I've officially finished out the Thursday Murder Club. Freaking finally. This was cute. I liked the main 4 characters we have. the main club that we're following. My problem with this book really comes about with how it's written and then how it's plotted. I don't love the perspective breakdowns in this. It's really wonky. Like, you have the chapters where Joyce is writing in her diary, and then you have alternating perspectives between the different members of the club, plus the police, the perpetrator, the victim. There's like the occasional one-off here or there to allow certain elements of the story to be given to us when none of the other characters would have been there to view it. It also always came across a little detached, so I had a hard time really getting invested in all of the characters. I liked the main four, I even liked the cops, but I think there was the possibility I could have really loved them. I never felt that strongly for them. Then, as far as the plotting of this book goes, so obviously I knew it was going to be a mystery going into it. This turned from one mystery into like 3 mysteries, and I understood how they all worked together, but like once we were getting answers to them, I realized I only cared about like 1.5. The main storyline that we see like from the beginning, and then I sort of was intrigued about this other one that ended up tying into that main mystery. And I'm only saying that because the reveal at the end, I'll honestly give it to him. That was actually really good. The twist and who was responsible for what happened, how it all worked out, I actually really liked that, and how it tied back to something that seemed like such a throwaway thing in the beginning. I thought that was all really great. But I think having 3 separate mysteries go on, it took away from the 2 mysteries I was actually interested in. And then I also think by having the relationship and dynamic with the 2 police officers, it made it harder for me to get invested in the different dynamics, because they're both involved with the club at the same time, but then they have like their own relationship that's establishing, and it felt like there was a little too much going on. I think it needed to be parsed down a bit. Also, at the end of the day, like, I do think this is a cozy mystery, and I keep trying. I keep wanting them to work for me, and they just don't. They don't. I don't really care about them. In the end, I just always feel let down. I don't know if it's because there doesn't seem as though there's enough stakes, which I do think was kind of present here. There were stakes, but I never felt like they were very high, honestly. There was some stuff that was laid out in the story that I can obviously see is going to be expanded upon in upcoming books. I could say I'm intrigued, but it would feel like I'm lying to you. Again, I really do think I just would enjoy this more in a movie format, especially with actors who are lined up to play some of these characters. Like, I'm very interested to see how that goes. I think they'll just bring more personality to the characters than we were really able to see because of the writing in the story. I'm glad I finally got this read, finally gave it a try. I've been intrigued by it for so long. I'm not going to continue the series, honestly, and I do think I'm going to unhaul this one. This was 3 stars, which is pretty comparable to like every other cozy mystery I try to read. It's enjoyable enough time that I will finish the book. I can almost guarantee I'm not going to remember anything about this afterwards. Hey guys, so I started into the Dictionary of Lost Words, and unfortunately I have already hit the point where I think I'm gonna put this down. I think this is a situation where I probably would have enjoyed this book if I had read it closer to when I received it. Technically this was a gift, but I think putting it off, that definitely was a poor choice. This isn't really what I'm gravitating towards anymore, so I was having a hard time staying invested in the story. I like the idea of it, and things actually did start off on a pretty strong foot, but as we start to watch 𝗖cie mature, I was already starting to see issues with the storytelling that I know are just going to be exacerbated if I continue reading. One of the main issues I'm foreseeing with this book is the fact that 𝗖cie, our main character, doesn't feel like a driving force in this story. I have found in previous experience that if it's going to be that sort of a book, I better really like the main character, and I don't feel strongly about her at all. At the beginning, we see her collecting these discarded words. She starts to store them away, and you know, that's going to lead into the Dictionary of Lost Words, right? Except she pretty quickly stops doing that because she gets reprimanded numerous times, which, okay, like, I get it, understand it, but then it sort of felt like that just disappeared from the story, which is a little odd given the fact that's, you know, the main reason I went into this book
book was because of this dictionary of lost words. We spend some time with Esme as she grows older, and we start to see different portions of her life. There's a lot of time skips in this. And I think another big problem I was having was the fact that no moment that felt as though it would really have some defining character building moments for Esme was actually getting much attention. We kept glossing over so much of her life. You have already skipped over so many serious rough things that I would have really appreciated diving into to understand how are they developing the woman she is becoming. There's allusions to heavier things, but like we don't really ruminate in any of those. We don't really get to understand how they impacted her and like what her thoughts are about them. It's almost like the inverse of show don't tell. It's like you're showing us something happened, but like you're telling us literally nothing. She is now a young woman and she sort of just seems like a spoiled one that doesn't really have any drive or ambition to do anything until somebody just like ends up giving her a job. It seems as though the story is happening to her as opposed to she is driving the story. And that's just frustrating to me. Like I said, I can already foresee that is going to become more frustrating if I were to continue on with this. So I think I'm just gonna give up now as opposed to try and push myself through this when I'm already estimating this would probably just be like a 3, maybe a 3.5 stars. I don't think I'm gonna love this like I might have if I read it 3 years ago, and that's a shame, but like tastes change. This is one of the problems of me buying or receiving a book and then not reading it. This happens. Like I said, I don't really read much historical alone anymore. It tends to be historical plus, like it's got something else going on, but it has a historical setting. This really is just like a historical lit fic, and I don't really care that much.
Hey y'all, so I have started into Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz now, and I don't actually know exactly how far in I am because the book within a book scenario makes it so that the page numbering is kind of wonky, but I would estimate I'm probably around like 60 pages, not 60 pages. I would estimate I'm around 60% into this now, and I am liking it, but the setup wasn't quite what I was expecting going in. So we start out with Susan, where she has just gotten the new manuscript from Alan, I think is the author, yes. And it's the next in his Atticus Pund series, where Atticus is now basically preparing for a retirement kind of thing. And so it's this last hurrah of trying to solve this final mystery before he retires. When it comes to book within a book scenarios, I always expect it to be more of like a one-to-one setup where, you know, we have one chapter in the book and then we have one chapter in the person's actual life. This is not that. Instead, Susan sits down and reads the manuscript. We read nearly the entirety of that story, and that's the first half of this book. I got so settled into it. I was starting to get really invested into the mystery. I won't lie, it was starting to drag a little bit for me. Like it felt like we were just taking a little too long. There were so many different suspects. There were so many different avenues. We finally have this, you know, moment of Atticus stating he's maybe solved it, and then we cut to Susan. And the way it was done, I will admit, was clever and kept me from being annoyed at the cliffhanger aspect. But then now we are following Susan, who is starting to investigate some sort of a mystery that is going on around Alan, the author, and his life. I got so settled into that original story with Atticus that it kind of yanked me out of the story when I was forced to remember this is a book within a book scenario. Like we have this whole other side of the story that I completely forgot about because we've essentially ignored it for 200 pages. I'm estimating 200 pages. Like that seems safe at this point. So I just don't love that sort of a setup with a story that has a book within a book scenario. Now I am starting to learn more about Susan. I'm starting to learn more about Alan, the author. I'm starting to figure out what's happening here and how this mystery is getting set up and what's going to be, I assume, the next half of this book. I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous that we're not going to get final answers around the Atticus Pund story with how this one's working out. Like, just reiterating, I don't like the fact that it wasn't a one-to-one scenario. And it doesn't have to be exact, a little bit more so that I'm getting invested in both stories at the same time. The rug pulled out from under me, and maybe that was the point. I mean, maybe Horowitz did that purposely, but personally, I don't really like that. I am listening to this on audio, and I will say I appreciate the fact that they do have two separate narrators. They have a man and a woman to do the breakdown. And then it is kind of wonky how not only do we have the two separate separate perspectives. But then along with that, within Atticus's story, there are different parts to the book. And then the different chapter breakdowns also aren't always nice and even. Like they flow together so seamlessly. Whenever I looked at the actual book and saw that it's not even like a full page break, it kind of makes sense that they don't even quite feel like chapter breaks because they flow so naturally into the next chapter, which I do think probably added to the bingeability of the story and why I got really invested into it and was so engaged, so engrossed. But it's just, yeah, it's interesting how it's going so far. I didn't expect it. I'm also a little nervous on, are we gonna get answers really? Because I believe this is the start of a series, and I honestly don't know if I'm liking this enough to push through like 3 more books that are on the chunkier side and have this really drastic breakdown that I don't tend to enjoy. It's going okay. At the very least, I'm getting into it, and I will say it's holding my attention better than some of the prior mysteries I have read lately. Also learned that Anthony Horowitz is the guy who wrote the Alex Rider novels. Didn't know that whenever I picked this up, so that was amusing. Hey y'all, so I have officially finished out Magpie Murders, and we're not doing solid in this video, unfortunately. I also just feel like as of late, any mystery I pick up is pretty middling. It's rather mediocre, which is such a shame because I used to say mysteries were my favorite genre, but I really feel like they're letting me down as of late. With that being said, I finished this one out, and I think this was okay. I did enjoy it overall, but I do very much feel like this book did not need to be as long as it was. And I think if the author had mixed this back and forth with the internal story, I would have enjoyed it more. I think having this breakdown between the internal story being the first half and then the external, the main focus for the second half, before closing it out by showcasing how the two connect, it just didn't work for me. It felt so separated. The second half, the change, the sudden shift that made it, I had such a difficult time getting invested into it. And then it was only worsened by the fact that the victim is really showcased to us as somebody who is not a good person. I mean, the more we learn about him, the more it seems as though nobody is really going to miss him, which again just made it really difficult for me to stay engaged with what happened to him, to care about figuring out what's going on. But I did keep going because I wanted to know, how did the internal story actually end? I think this was really clever. I think it did have some really interesting ways that Susan worked out the mystery and pieced together things from the internal story with what was going on in her world. I didn't like how either story ended. I do think the twists, the final reveals were surprising. I did not expect either of them, which, I mean, most mysteries nowadays, I guess, like some element. So the fact that I didn't expect either ending, yeah, that's really great. It was one of those situations where, though the twists made sense, I wasn't satisfied by it. It wasn't a situation where I felt like, yay, we solved it. It was very much like okay, we solved it. That's not a feeling I want to have at the end of a mystery book. I want to feel proud of myself and proud of the detective for following along and seeing them come to the final conclusion. I totally understand why other people could enjoy this, but like I said, I think the layout of the story really was the biggest inhibitor of my enjoyment. And then the fact that I didn't like how the story is closed out also was a bit of a problem for me. Honestly, I don't think I will continue on with the series. I didn't really love Susan. I think the Atticus Punt character from the internal book was cool. Like I said, very much, very, very reminiscent of a Hercule Poirot or like a Benoit Blanc sort of guy. It's one of those where I feel like a lot of the book is well written, but I didn't enjoy it a ton. It's a 3.5. I'll just go ahead and say that. I'm hesitant to do so because I'm frustrated that I read 500 pages to only give it 3.5 stars. Hey y'all, so I started into Sign Here by Claudia Lux, and I'm not gonna lie, I got like 30-ish% in, and I really had a think of, am I liking this enough to keep reading? And I decided yes. Or, well, not that I was liking it enough, but I was intrigued at the very least. Now I have hit the halfway percent, and I'm gonna not finish this. I don't care that much, honestly. I've mentioned numerous times on my channel, I don't mind unlikable characters. In fact, I tend to enjoy them, but I have to be able to root for them in some capacity. And I
do not like any of the characters in this particularly well. 3 of them I'm definitely not rooting for, and the 4th, don't really know what I'm rooting for them to do. The setup of this was interesting, but the story itself feels so separate. We have the storyline taking place in hell with peyote and his attempting to try and get the last member of this family. At least that's what I was sold, but in reality, it feels like that's not necessary at all to majority of the events we're actually seeing him experience. And then on the opposite side, we have this family of terrible people, honestly. I don't really care to read any of their perspectives. It feels very domestic thrillery, and just that's not really my thing. I don't tend to enjoy those very much. There's also a lot of sexualization of young teenage girls, like 13 to 15, and that feels so uncomfortable. It does not feel like it is necessary to the story, to the character work that is being done, pretty much anything. It's just really creepy. Along with that, the storyline that's following this family, I feel like it's actually really predictable because, again, it's very domestic thrillery. The hell storyline does not feel like it really interacts with this one at all. And then with peyote and hell, like I said, I don't think how this book gets sold is really the focus of peyote's storyline. And while I do think having this like corporate perspective of hell is really entertaining, and while there are some humorous moments here and there, it's just not really as darkly funny as I was anticipating. It also feels like sometimes the humor is pretty forced. And I just have this feeling that the end of this book is gonna have this like after school special thing going on. And I'm not really in for that. So unfortunately, this is just really falling down for me and everything I went into it expecting. So yeah, like I said, I hit the halfway point and realized I don't care about any of these characters. And even the intrigue of like how the stories were going to tie together, I'm at the halfway point and we still barely has seen anything about what's going on for these two things to be in the same story. So I hit the point where I don't care anymore. I'm DNFing it. That's a shame. Part of me like wants to look up what happened in the story to like finish this out. How does everything connect? But the other half of me doesn't really care. Here's hoping the last book of this video goes better.
Hey y'all, so I've hit about the halfway point into the Lightning Struck Heart, and I am really enjoying this so far. I've actually been lucky enough to find that this series is available on Kobo Plus, so I've been reading it on my Kobo, which has been really great because it allows me to sort of not hyperfixate on how chunky the book feels in my hand and how small the font looks. So we have our main character, Sam, and he is ridiculous. I knew going in that this kind of was a parody. I think you can honestly tell pretty quickly just from like the initial setup of this story with this whole chosen one element, but the humor really highlights it. This is like, it's very reminiscent of a lot of movies I would describe as teenage boy humor, and that is not a knock. I enjoy those movies. I have to be in the right mindset for them, but I can love a good teenage boy humor movie. This is that, but make it gay. And it does kind of mean I am loving it all the more. I, again, think like I needed to be in the right mindset for this. I need to be wanting something that's a little silly, a little goofy, not taking itself too seriously. A lot of the comedy is rather raunchy. It's definitely a little R-rated. There's so many sex jokes and like, haha, dicks are funny things going on. I will not lie to you. It gets a little grating at times. Every once in a while, it feels like, okay, it's a little too much. Let's pull it back a bit. In the moments where we're having something more serious go on, it just lightens the mood perfectly, and it fits with the overall vibe of the story, the world, and the cast of characters, because this is such an interesting group. Sam is sweet and naive and silly, but really smart and strong at the same time, and yet he is so unaware. Ryan, we get to see, is like the picture perfect knight, and it's very clear he's uncomfortable with this role, but also sort of enjoys it. And it's very clear, has feelings for Sam. It's one of those where it's like the two main characters aren't seeing this, but everybody around them is seeing it, and it is so obvious to you as the reader. So it's constantly being utilized for humor, and I do really enjoy that. The world itself is very classic fantasy. So Sam is is being trained by Morgan, who is very much like a Merlin character. He is the current wizard to the king. The king is pretty easygoing, pretty silly. I really appreciate that you can tell he loves Sam as his son as well. And there's this funny bit of whenever it's discovered that Justin and Ryan are engaged, the king wants to set Sam up with somebody else. It kind of has this funny montage of like the different suitors who keep coming up to Sam and making him uncomfortable or like trying too hard or not trying enough. And it's ridiculous, but it's really fun. His family are there as well. It doesn't have this like tragic backstory. There's a little bit of sadness every once in a while, but overall this like feels so happy, so lucky. It kind of gives me the feeling of an aged up version of The Extraordinaries by this author. A lot of the comedy is very similar and just like the feel of the story, the family vibes. And I don't want to get into too many of the adventures that get set up either, but it has kind of that like adventure of the week thing going once they actually set off on the quest. Every chapter they get into some new squabble, new drama, and they have to figure their way out, led into this hilarious ongoing line of Ryan being like, does everybody want to either kill you or sleep with you? It is so much fun. I am having a really good time. It does feel like it's taking a little bit to get going, even though this book only is like 430. I think it's a little misleading for how long the story itself feels so far. That's something that maybe if this series gets republished, they may want to consider doing a little bit more editing on it to kind of help with the pacing of it, but also maybe pull back on some of those scenes where the inappropriate, ridiculous, raunchy humor goes a little bit too far or for too long. I think that would help, but even still, really, really enjoying this. I am. It's ridiculous, but I'm having so much fun.
Hey y'all, so I have officially finished the last book for this video, The Lightning Struck Heart. This wasn't quite my favorite of Klune's work. I definitely think the comedy style is a bit much at times. Even still though, unsurprisingly, Klune's character work is fantastic. The found family here, so good. I really liked the meta humor that was going on in the story because it's this constant, you as the audience are in on jokes and some characters are in on the joke, but other characters are not. And it was so silly, but really fun. And I really enjoyed that element of it. The little romance that developed was also really cute because there's so many aspects to it you are also in on. And then there's lots of references to stuff that we don't actually get clear-cut answers to until later on in the story. Across the board, it was really, really entertaining. But I definitely think this is going to be one of those that like, you have to be cool with the humor. You got to be okay with things being a little crude and ridiculous. This is definitely a book where I'm going to be really picky about who I recommend it to. I loved getting to know Sam and the little found family he has. I really liked getting to know Ryan some more. And I liked that villainous element of the story. I really thought it was going to go in one direction and it didn't actually take that. It kind of surprised you with this twist, and like it didn't feel like a cop out to kind of villainize this one character. Instead, it felt like you get to understand the character a little bit more once we see behind the veil. And I did really appreciate that. It does have me intrigued about where things are going to be going for some of these characters moving forward. Going with that, I do want to continue the series, but because of what I was saying about the humor, I definitely think this is one that I don't really want to binge because I'm worried I'll get burnt out on that humor. It's definitely something I think I'm gonna have to be in the mood for it before I pick it up. It was really fun. It was really cute. I'm glad I finally got around to reading this one. I think this is gonna be a 4-star. Like I said, it's not my favorite of Klune's work. Definitely has a lot of the things I love about his writing. There's lots of little moments in the writing itself where it feels similar to either like the Green Creek series or House on the Cerulean Sea. There's actually a few things that even feel kind of reminiscent of some of the characters in Extraordinaries. And I think that's kind of just something I'm going to pick up on more and more because I have read so much of Klune's work at this point. But I do feel like you can tell this is one of his older novels because I definitely can see the maturing of his writing in some of his newer stuff. And now also know that the rest of the series is available on Kobo Plus. And without further ado, that is officially it for today, y'all. So thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I guess let's go ahead and leave a lightning emoji in the comments down below. I have links to all of my socials as well as a few ways you can support me down in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!